The Ultimate Gift of Sai Baba by Miss Suzanne Palomo. It was midnight, 31st December 1988. The plane heading toward India flew into a new year, and its passengers excitedly raised their glasses to announce Happy 1989. Hours later, after a nervous and long wait at the Bombay, Mumbai airport, I was on a flight to Bangalore, the city now called Bangalore. As I secured a taxi to Puttaparthi for the following morning, I suddenly burst into tears, wondering why I had come to India. The next day I reached the ashram of Satya Sai Baba and was welcomed by a group of Italian devotees. Thus, a new experience began. Strange dreams for a year. I had intriguing dreams that were more than mere dreams. There was one in which I was standing in the middle of an open field atop a vast hill. A man beside me told me, "Never forget to look for the big in the small," making me appreciate the majesty of my surroundings and the size of the blades of grass taller than me. There was another dream where many American Indians were running in a circle around me, shooting arrows at me. I was mentally repeating, "My Shakti will protect me." I had no clue what Shakti meant, but none of the arrows hit me. This is the dream I shared with my friend E. When I shared this Shakti dream with my friend E, his face lit up with a beautiful smile. He ran into his room and returned with a picture. It showed a group of Indian men, not the American Indians I saw in my dream, all dressed in orange clothes, and he told me they were spiritual masters. The picture was taken in India during the All Guru conference. "Your dream may mean that one of these teachers is trying to contact you," he said. "Relax, you have nothing to fear. If you are lucky, one of them will reach out to you. If you are very lucky, he will contact you," pointing to the man in the center of the picture. I didn't know who the man was and didn't ask. Nor did he tell me anything else. Instead, he put some grey powder in the palm of my hand and said, "Trust me. It isn't a drug, you can taste it." That night I had another dream. I was walking next to the man in the center of the picture in the assembly of spiritual teachers. We were talking like old friends. I told him, "Yes, I want to come, but now I can't. I have too much work to do. As soon as I can, I will come." The following morning, I brushed it aside as a weird dream. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. An unexpected break. I was working like crazy on the project of developing the first ever English course for Italian children. It was to be distributed by the most renowned publisher in Italy and sold in the newspaper kiosks in 36 weekly series. This was a wonderful opportunity for any illustrator author, especially as I was early in my career. I created everything from scratch: the characters, the stories, the didactics, filling the project with simple rhymes later put to music by G, a professional musician. I knew the importance of my responsibility as it would potentially reach thousands of children. In fact, the first two issues sold 200,000 copies each. In my heart, I yearned to create something of lasting value, something light and happy, inspiring the children and equipping them with tools to make their journey through life easier and more fulfilling. In the middle of this hectic project, the head of the editorial team told me that the publisher needed time to evaluate a gadget to accompany the project. So, she wanted me to take a break from work for a month. Somehow, at precisely that time, the promise I had made to that man in my dream surfaced. And then, the phone rang. It was he calling to wish me Merry Christmas. He was leaving for India a few days later. Learning that I had unexpectedly been relieved of my workload, he suggested I join him. Though a bit scared, I intuited a power, a push, an extraordinary presence that was out of my control. It was impossible to fly to India with his group, as bookings were not available. However, he instructed me in detail over the phone, concluding with, "And don't let anything distract you when you reach the ashram. Just focus on him." It was valuable advice I passed on to many others later. Considering everything, I made my decision. I would definitely go, if not this year, next year. I had thought this meant next Christmas, but a few weeks later, on 1st January, I landed in Bombay. I still asked myself, why am I here, when I reached the ashram? "Ask him," said he, who magically met my taxi when it entered the compound. Less than an hour later, I was sitting on the floor with other newcomers for an orientation about the ashram's dress code and rules. "Many of you are probably asking yourself why you are here," the person began. "Hey, that's my question," I thought, leaning forward attentively to listen to the answer. "You are here for spiritual training." It was as simple as that, and it felt good. I felt happy and satisfied. First darshan and interview. Though everyone described incredible things that happened during darshan, I had no memorable experience. I respected my surroundings and appreciated the silence at daybreak and the simplicity of the daily routine. While visiting the bookshop, I came across The Vision of the Divine by Fani Banda. Reading the book, I learned the first key to the fundamental truth I will never forget. Most people who see Sai Baba identify him with his crown of hair and orange gown. This is a mistake. You need to realize that he embodies the divine principle. You must move beyond the form and grasp the principle. These words resonated deeply within me, and I was excited. While patiently waiting during the next darshan, I said silently, "Please don't misunderstand me, and please don't take this personally, but I am not interested in you. I am interested in the principle." That day as Swami came walking, I looked at him without looking at him, and that day, he looked back. I read the thought for the day, which emphasized, "Remember, the time allotted to you is very short. Make good use of it." I felt that the time allotted referred to not only my lifetime, but also my time in the ashram. I resolved not to miss out on anything during the remaining 7 days. Despite feeling awkward and uncomfortable during bhajans, I prayed to Baba to help me sing for him. The day before I had to leave, G, the professional musician from Italy, was called for an interview. She and her husband had just joined our group, so I also went in. It was my first interview. I was the group's translator and interpreter and cried my heart out many times, overwhelmed by what was happening. G asked Swami if the Italians could sing for him in the mandir. He turned to me and asked, "When are you leaving?" After 3 nudges from a friend, I finally answered, "I'm leaving tomorrow morning, Swami." "You can sing this afternoon," he said to G, leaving her in a state of glee. But she just had a few hours to train the entire group of Italian devotees to sing. I didn't understand why G thanked me after the interview until years later when I realized that Swami materialized that opportunity as an answer to my prayer to sing for him and my reply that I was leaving the next day. During the interview, Swami spoke to me thrice in a language I did not understand. Each time he concluded by saying, "Tell them," in clear English. I was humbled, not understanding what I had to tell the group. But we know how deep Swami's messages are, with many layers of meaning to grasp. This understanding happens gradually over the years, and even today, I often pray, "Dear Swami, what is it that I have to tell, and to whom?" After the interview ended, Swami blessed us by giving out small packets of vibhuti, and my heart started beating fast. I thought, I must talk to him. This can't be ending now before I speak to him. I instinctively spoke to him from within my heart. "You know that I would like to speak to you," I said. "And if my wish is right, you will call me." Again, I felt that maybe I should ask him in humility. Right then, Swami was looking at me, handing me vibhuti. I rose on my knees and folded my hands. "May I see you?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes, I will see you." He sat back on his chair and looked at me intensely and, after what seemed like ages, told me to go into the private interview room with an elderly lady. The interview was the most beautiful time for me, and Swami's loving words, guidance, and divine assurance have accompanied me ever since. Test as his taste the following summer, I was back in Prashanti Nilayam. I realized his grace in giving me so much attention during the last visit. Our relationship had taken shape over the year. I felt close to him as if we were always together. I had learned a few chords on my guitar and would speak pray to him in music. These moments were fulfilling and intense, and nothing could match them. That's why I didn't expect to be called for an interview again, but I did expect a sign of acknowledgement from him. But after what I thought was a wave of his hand at me on the first day, he totally ignored me throughout my stay. During my last darshan of that stay, he walked by me without even turning his head to say goodbye. I was downcast and very disappointed, and I shed tears when he left the hall. I cried leaving the ashram that night, although I told myself repeatedly that Swami had given me my share of his time and that others deserved his attention. But I was still hurt. Back home, my sister called me from Rome, saying she had seen me in a dream. "You were very angry with Swami because he wasn't calling you," she said. I replied that she was mistaken and that there was no way I could be angry with Swami. But she insisted that I was very angry. When I put down the phone, the tension exploded. Sobbing my heart out, I told Swami, "I am angry with you, Swami. You didn't call me or even look at me." And then, I suddenly grasped the meaning of it all and the immensity of his grace. I felt the sensation of tearing apart the umbilical cord of attachment from the last darshan. I had fallen so much in love with Swami over the first year that he wanted to raise me beyond attachment to his form. By deliberately ignoring me, he guided and encouraged me to always stay connected to the fundamental truth, to Satya Sai, the principle. His greatest gift to me, "Did Swami create anything for you?" is a recurrent question when we share our experiences. Since my very first trip, I have always replied, yes. He materialized my faith. My faith in the essence, in the highest, in the principle of truth that underlies and upholds all the rest. I tell people that Swami empowered the values I had always believed in by giving shape to them and bringing them to life. I tell them he gave me all the tools I needed for my spiritual training and upliftment to help me stay on track. These five jewels, truth, right conduct, peace, love, and non-violence, are the pillars of the Satya Sai Education in Human Values program. This lifelong learning process was later defined by Swami himself as educare to highlight how the inherent wisdom, the fundamental truth, is already present in every child. It only has to be drawn out. Words cannot convey the depth of spiritual training gifted by Swami, the experience, the awakening, the growing awareness, the delight, the love, and the immense sense of gratitude that flows with it. Miss Suzanne Palomo.